from chapter 10, beginning from God's material blessings for men. Speculatively, let us analyze from three major aspects how God has gifted us with blessings. Phenomenologically, we could either have something, do something, or be something or somebody. In other words, God has gifted man with three basic endowments. First, the human ability to own, possess, and control fundamental human rights, including the right to have properties and stuff. Second, the ability to do or make human sort of creations be productive. And third, the ability ultimately to make of us or to be what God had determined He wanted us to become in His Book of Lives. The kind of unique person God had planned for each one of us to be. Whichever of the three categories of divine endowments man gets to enjoy most as God's bounties on earth for any individual man, the undeniable parameter by which we consider any of them as human blessings is precisely that as blessings they are gifts provided by God. There should not be any mistaking of taking away credit from God. However, God will use whatever instrumentality, primarily the pre-human participation through man's natural faculties, aided by the grace of God, to work His ways of producing the blessings for us. This way, we give witness both to God's glorification and to His bountifulness in His gifts of blessings. This prevents us from attributing the blessings to our human vain glory. God's gift of having or owning by individual men and women. In the context of the kingdom of God and the world, what great human blessings has God willed man to have or to be His inalienable rights. Chief among these are the humanly essential constitutional provisions inspired by God upon men lawmakers. For example, the right to civil freedom, civil or civilized living, property ownership, free speech, peaceful living, civil due process before conviction of crime, habeas corpus rights, and rights against unlawful arrest, including the so-called Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination and the rights to freedom of worship. Most of these are self-evident and self-explanatory in terms of their inherently benefiting or enabling authentic human existence. This explains why these rights are so obviously most beneficial human blessings, and hence are derivative from God's essence of goodness and compassion. Civil freedom affords the basic desire of God that man remains able to exercise his faculty of free will. Civilized living expresses another basic right to life. The right to own properties assures each individual equal opportunity to enjoy of things from God's creations. Free speech is one practical extension of the right of freedom. Peaceful living or peaceful living right enables man protection from assault, violence, and inappropriate physical, even psychological danger and threats. Due process, another practical extension of freedom, protects any hasty and unfair accusing of anyone by other people for reason of unfortunate circumstances. The right against unlawful search and unlawful arrest is again literally self-explanatory in their benefits to the individual and the society. Then the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination is only a most prudent benefit in societies or state governance that have grown way too complicated vis-a-vis legally conflicting judgments. Finally, what is freedom of worship? Does it or should it exist in democratic societies? Whereas its civil aspect allows for a democratized tolerance for all sorts of religious quote-unquote license, its paramount human benefit is still the freedom for open and utmost worshipping of God. God-abiding democratic people or countries which subscribe to the above God-given human rights are precisely blessed when they enable the mandating and exercise of such inherently human social rights. Democratic countries and democratic governments are surely the social political environment which, in contrast to undemocratic countries or governments, is more conducive for promoting and instituting God-ordained, man-made socio-political blessings. Government freedom for all its citizens. Democratic countries or government, however, did not just mushroom somewhere from nowhere. For example, the American tradition of civil liberties, exemplified above, had their roots from the American ancestors' search and struggle for moral righteousness. In its most basic expression, the ancestral originators of American civil liberties precisely first sought the primal freedom of expression of worship. The very first community to be called later the Americans came from the foreign shores and sought this place America in order to be able to exercise their freedom to worship God. Throughout their first years of occupation by the first 13 American colonies, their fundamental activity, individually and as a community, aside from collective political attempts of self-governing that was not subordinated to England, France, or Germany, was to build churches and worship communities. The two goals combined were the elemental expression and manifestation of the colonizers' internal or spiritual character. Righteousness in faith and righteousness in political freedom. This fact providentially testified how their fidelity to righteousness led them to the later formulation and legislation of statutes and regulations, which will eventually put in place and institutionalize the above described civil liberties that have come to be fundamentally associated with the American democratic government. History tells us, however, that the experience of merging with the native Indians proved to be violent and troublesome. The only saving grace from this initial people conflict between the natives and the occupying colonizers is the present fact that ultimately the growth and development of a democratic America, a democratic people, redounds to the growth, development, and emancipation of the native Indians individually and as a people, according as they benefit proportionately of America that has grown, developed, and progressed as a civilized country and people. In other words, if not directly, indirectly, democratic American traditions and institutions made sure the native Indians were equitably incorporated in the American communities and government. Moreover, American national heritage will not let us forget, as an American nation and people, of a more problematic and testing experience we underwent. That much more delicate era of American history when we merged mainstream America and the white culture, slavery manacled black Americans. Hence, that inevitable poignant period of American history and society when the nation experienced and suffered what was a very sad, divisive, and human lives costly American Civil War. And yet, with the leadership of a firm, God-fearing and believing President Abraham Lincoln, the American people chose to submit to the people's moral mandate to unslave, once and for all, the unfairly disenfranchised black minority and accord them equal status of human freedom in the eyes of God and the nation's people. Later, this godly spirit of the nation mandated its people, furthermore, to the martyrdom of Martin Luther King Jr., with a final across-the-board further democratizing of American social structure. The country legislated into law the abolition of those segregating rules and practices between the white majority and the black minority, the abolition of the segregated schools, segregated stores and restaurants, and segregated buses. Thus, all semblances of disparities and partiality, which still impinge on the fullest exercise of civil freedom, particularly by blacks or colored people, pre pre physical mobility, were finally removed. God's gifts of human faculties or talents. Now, as regards that aspect of human gift by which God further endowed man, namely the gift of the abilities to do things, whether with his hands or feet or vocal faculties, or his emotive artistic drives, or his mind. Man has the divine gifts for human creativity, making, or doing. This reflects his imaging of the divine power of creation. How marvelous, and how varied the artisanship, inventiveness, skillfulness, ingenuity, and intelligence man has been given to express himself and fulfill himself. Man is a farmer, a carpenter, architect, engineer, mechanic, machine operator, teacher, accountant, psychologist, physician, chemist, pilot, mathematician, lawyer, lawmaker, and leader politician. Such an unraveling of innumerable gifts God has endowed man, to be capable of doing and excelling. God's omnipotence is best reflected in man's endless actual arts and crafts, and skills, and total potentialities. Yet, they only glorify God as blessings from His providence. If all these are applied to good uses and not for evil purposes. The magnitude of these gifts of God is illustrated by the advances of sciences and technology, which are aspects of the divine truth made open or unveiled to human minds and human ingenuity. Modern aviation, instant global communication, mass productions of goods, sophisticated land and sea transportation, improved health and medical services, multifarious sources and uses of natural energy for all kinds of peoples, comfort, uses and conveniences, etc. These are all end results of the gifts of creativity God has collectively endowed human beings. Individuals gifted with one of these varied traits or skills have that one concrete reason to be grateful to God. humbleness about human gifts. Appreciation, however, of this wonderful human creativity, artisanship, skillfulness, and acts of inventiveness must not becloud the humble processes that accompanied the inception moments of inspiration down through the long stages of the conceptualization of the idea, organization of the integral elements of the crop, product invention, engineering designing, musical composing, through their meticulous finish. Many of these inventors, composers, technologists, designers, or writers could and would recount the experience of the initial ridicule by habitual critics. Some of these critics would further testify, some of them would further testify to the obstacle of financial strength they were in, which, as a matter of fact, hindered the fruition of some efforts of some of them. Moreover, the stories of their lives would reveal to us their own internal frustration at getting bogged down over particular details from their imagination or from the missing smooth flow to their skin or project machination. Surely, with their gift giving, they would be known to exhibit many alleged moments of great inspiration. But they would also be reported as being stuck into dry spells that sometimes took days and months that could have buried their idea altogether. Even as we examine some of these marvelous creations by man, we shall be reminded of the great length of time or of the severe hardships involved that it took these marvels to be finished. Just recall the making of the pyramids of Egypt. Despite its great designs and enduring structures, we knew from history that without the physical and bloody sacrifice of human lives, the pyramids would not have come to being. The same thing with the first American intercontinental railroad system. Its beginning could not have progressed into completion and sophistication without the physical presence of the many early Chinese laborers. Remember the life struggles of many renowned classical musicians. Beethoven finished his Ode to Joy after he had turned deaf. And Handel finished his Messiah after prolonged fits of sadness and depression. Some produce great works of, great works of arts, despite being literally starved poor, often without enough money, even to buy food. Support their life subsistence, or earning insignificant work wages just in order to be able to attend to their artistic passion or finish musical compositions. Abuse of the gifts. But according as individuals or people abuse the uses and purposes of these God-given skills, abilities, and potentials, and products. Accordingly, such human marvels do lose their individual and social beneficence and divine manifestations. Examples of twisted and disoriented exploiting of these human crafts, inventions, and prowess are the widespread use of the modern audio-video technology for pornography or actual projects of human cloning. This and other similar arrogant enterprises of men in the world are self-crowning pretenses of futile human self-sufficiency. These people have no qualms producing half-human forms with real human souls, bound to live inhumanely. Their unsatiated daring ended up responsible for giving life to monstrous looking or monstrous behaving human beings. Like the above company of talented amoral geniuses are many other individuals who, as they show up their quote-unquote masterpieces, they trumpet cocky attitudes or brassy and bragging sports-like upmanship, verbalized through expressions like, me first, you can't beat me, I dare you, try me, I'm your worst nightmare, etc., etc. Even in professional sports environment, both the players and their fans display untempered boasting against opponent players and fans. These types of men and women's behavior all distort the reality of human imperfection and cover up the undeniable human dependence upon God. Next, the gift of becoming what man is destined to be. The gift of becoming what man is destined to be. Level 1. Finally, the third and the highest way by which man has been endowed by God with blessings is the gift of becoming the kind of individual God has meant each individual to be. The gift to be the unique person and nobody else. A man has been predestined by God. Realizes for every man both his God-ordained niche and luck in God's book of life. And this ultimate human blessing is a blessing which is not only earthbound, terrestrial, and temporal in character, but heavenly and eternal. We are dealing here with man's personal mission and destiny in being created by God. This get thus is both principally man's own making together with God's. Initial creating of man and allowing the growing of man according to a special providential plan about how each man is to shape and play his role in the mystery of mutual fellowship, evangelizing, prayerfulness, and activism among God's people, but most especially in how man, to the utmost, by God's help, shall be able to return